Hi all. I will now be recording my lecture for chapter 2. In chapter 2, you need to study the terms that I have listed for you in your study guide: packet switching, then TCP IP, IP 4 and 6, domain names, what is a web client, what is a web server, what is HTTP, what is URL, what are email protocols, what is the difference between an intranet and an extranet, what is virtual private network, VPN, what is the difference between a public network and a private network, what are markup languages, and then different internet connection options and internet 2. Okay. So I would start with packet switching. Remember that packet switching is a technology or a method used to move data in the internet. Okay, so packet switching is the technology that helps move data in the internet. I would explain to you further what is packet switching. When I'm sending an email or I'm sending a file over the internet, what happens is that the files and the messages, the email messages, are broken down into small pieces called packets. Each packet is labeled with two addresses, the origin and the destination. Now these packets travel in the internet using the most economic path. When they reach their destination, they are reassembled. Okay, so packet switching is the method of moving data in the internet. Packet switching consists of breaking files or email messages that you sent over the internet into small pieces called packets, and each packet will have two addresses, the origin and the destination. Once they are broken down, they are sent over the internet and they use the most economic path. That's how they are routed. Once they reach their destination, they are reassembled into messages and files. Okay, there are two protocols. One is called TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, and another is called IP, Internet Protocol. TCP and IP, these are the two primary protocols. Okay, so what is TCP again? Transmission Control Protocol. What does it do? It controls the making and breaking of the packets. Like the messages are broken into small pieces called packets, this making and breaking of packets is controlled by TCP. Then what does IP do? IP controls the routing of the packets. IP is the Internet Protocol. It controls the routing of the packets. So breaking of the messages into packets and reassembling them is controlled by Transmission Control Protocol, and routing of the packets is controlled by Internet Protocol. Okay, now what is IP version 4 and version 6? We will look into that. IP version 4 is the one that we follow right now. Okay, it's a 32-bit IP address. IP address identifies computers. Okay, so 32-bit IP address is IP version 4, which identifies computers. And so if you send an email message to me, say anonymously, in the email header I can find out your IP address. And IP address, there are software available for free in the internet. It says You can search with IP address lookup, and you will see that if you put in the IP address, you can find out who has sent you that email. That's why, if you send an anonymous email message to someone, it can be always traced back to you. To you means to the computer from where you have sent the message. Okay, always in the email header there is an IP address. Many times it does not show because we have hidden the header. If you click and say display the header, then it would show the IP address. An IP address basically identifies the computer from which the email has been originated. Okay, so 32-bit IP address is IP version 4. IPv6 is the IP address of the future, which is a 128-bit IP address for the future, 128-bit. All computers connected to the internet has a unique IP address. Okay, so as I was telling you, even if you send somebody an email anonymously, the email can always be traced back to the machine from which it has generated. Okay. Then domain names. Domain names, set of words assigned to specific IP address. Okay. For example, Lamar's IP address is 140.158.64.247. Every time if I have to access Lamar University and I have to type in 140.158.64.247, that's too much. I won't remember. Okay, so set of words that would be assigned to specific IP address is the domain name. So for Lamar University, the domain is lamar.edu. Okay, so what is the difference between web client and a web server? Web client is a machine which is connected to the internet. The moment you open the browser, you become a web client. Okay, for example, you came in lab, say 246A in Callaway building. You logged on to a machine. The moment you open a browser, say you opened Internet Explorer or Mozilla Firefox, your machine immediately became a web client. So you become a machine which is connected to the internet. Okay. So a web client can ask for web pages from other computers. So you can now type in lamar.edu and you can ask for web pages from the machine where Lamar web pages are stored. Or you can say dell.com and ask for web pages from Dell's server. So once again, a web client is a machine which is connected to the internet. What is a web server? Web server is again a machine which is connected to the internet and which has files stored which has been shared. So if I store my files on a server and share it, that anybody who has internet connection can access those files. If you save files in your computer at home, nobody else can access those files, right? Those are your files stored in your computer. But if you store those files in a computer's web server and share them, then anybody who has internet access can have access to those files. So a server, web server, is basically a machine connected to the internet and which stores files which has been shared. It accepts requests from web clients for web pages. So if I make a request, it will let me look at those web pages. What is HTTP? Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTTP is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. These are web page delivery rules. Okay, web page delivery rules. What is URL? URL is Uniform Resource Locator. Like for example, URL is an example of URL will be http://www.lamar.edu. That's an example of a URL. It's a combination of a protocol name and the domain name. Domain name is www.lamar.edu and the protocol is HTTP. So URL is the combination of HTTP and the domain name. Okay, email protocols. Email protocols, there are different email protocols like SMTP. This is called Simple Mail Transfer Protocol. Then POP, Post Office Protocol, and IMAP. Okay. SMTP, Simple Mail Transmission Protocol, describes mail transmission on the internet. Okay. POP is Post Office Protocol. It delivers mail to the users. Okay, it delivers mail. It's a protocol which delivers mail to the user. You can specify the maximum number of mails which you want to be displayed. You can specify whether you can delete the mail from the server after you have accessed it, and so on. IMAP is also IMAP. IMAP is the same as POP. It's newer, okay, it's a recent one. It is similar to POP, but it has some additional features. Intranet and extranet. Intranet is just like internet, but to be used by people internal to the organization. For example, MyLamar. MyLamar is an example of an intranet. MyLamar is similar to an internet, but it can be accessed only by people like faculty, student, staff inside of Lamar. Outside of Lamar, if you are not a Lamar associate, you will not be able to access MyLamar. So MyLamar is a perfect example of an intranet. Internally used by the organization, has all features of an internet. What is an extranet then? Extranet is similar to intranet. Only difference is that some authorized external users can access that. For example, Dell would share their information which is internal to the organization with their suppliers. Okay, HP would share their information with their suppliers. So suppliers can log on to their intranet. So that makes it an extranet. So basically, extranet is also internal with some authorized external users. Then what is VPN? Virtual Private Network. Virtual Private Network is an example of an extranet which is using public networks and protocols. Okay. Public networks, those are basically public internet. Okay, those are public network internet which is accessible by everybody. So extranet using public networks and protocols is virtual private network. Then how is the security and the privacy maintained in a VPN if it is using a public network? It uses IP tunneling and encapsulation. Encapsulation means it encrypts data. So while the data is sent through the internet, through the IP tunnel, the data is encrypted, and IP tunneling basically means private passage through the public internet. So they are using, VPN is using the public internet, but they create a private passage within the internet, okay? And they also encrypt data. So that when I'm using VPN for transmitting data, my data is encrypted, so it's protected, and it's also safe because I'm using the private IP tunnel through the public internet. Public network is public availability, and private network is a private line or a leased line to be used only by that party which paid for it. Okay. XML and HTML. Okay, XML and HTML, these are markup languages. HTML is hypertext markup language, and it's a language that includes a set of codes or tags attached to text. Okay, and XML is also a markup language. Okay, it's called extensible markup language. This is another markup language which has been derived from HTML for use on the web. And what is HTML? It's a broad, markup language, and XML is basically used for the web. Okay, is used for the web. Okay, now internet connection options. Internet connection options, you can read it from the slide or you can look at the book. It's in page 86 and 93 to 93. Mainly you can see the broadband connections, okay, the different types. I believe the best is to look at figure 2.15 in the book. 2.15 in the book, you will see that there are different types of services, like there are, it talks about DSL, digital subscriber line, it talks about cable modem, okay, it talks about satellite, it talks about ISDN, then leased lines, different types of leased lines, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in cable modem and in DSL, in both cases, you need to know that the upstream and the downstream speeds are different. So it's called asymmetric, okay, asymmetric connection, because generally it's much faster to download stuff using cable or DSL lines than to upload files. Okay, so that's why it's called asymmetric. We prefer asymmetric to symmetric because asymmetric is more practical. We download much more than we upload. Okay. Now, and what is meant by bandwidth? You need to know that bandwidth is the amount of data that can travel through a communication line per unit of time. Okay. And broadband is when you send multiple media like voice, text, video, okay, through the same transmission media. That's broadband. And it has a much higher speed, more than 200 kbps. Then you need to know Internet 2. Internet 2 is basically an experimental test bed for new networking technologies that is separate from the original Internet. Internet 2 is faster. And it has achieved bandwidths of more than 10 Gbps and more on parts of its network. Internet 2 is used by universities to conduct large collaborative research projects, okay? And Internet 2 has a much higher bandwidth. So this is essentially chapter 2. Chapter 2 is important because you learn a lot of new terms here. You learn the concept of packet switching, which is used for sending data over the network. You learned what are the protocols TCP and IP stand for. What is IP? Version 4 is 32-bit, and then IPv6 is 128-bit. What is a domain name? Why we use domain name? What is a client? What is a server? What is HTTP and URL? What are the different email protocols? What is the difference between an intranet and an extranet? What is virtual private network? It uses IP tunneling and encryption. Public and private network differences, different markup languages. Then internet connection options, okay? Different options you have. You can use a DSL, you can use cable modem, you can use satellite. Okay, all those different options, you can look into the pages and the slides in the book. And then Internet 2, which is a faster, different internet option. This is your chapter 2.